All right, this is Kirk Hanratty from SynerComm. We're here today to talk about how do you move from where you are today in the world of the work from anywhere, whether it's your customers, your employees, accessing applications that are anywhere, and do that in a way that you have the agility you need to be successful in the modern world, and as well as cost effective. And that's really what we thrive at. Is I'll give you a little background on where I'm coming from, and then we can talk about how strategies to go about accomplishing that and how we can help. So SynerComm's digital transformation history goes way back. We were founded back in 1992 as personalized computer systems. So we had to make our first paradigm shift from personalized systems and building PCs out of the garage to adapt with the times of the introduction of the PC era into the networking era. And that's where we really bit our teeth. We were a big 3Com partner, if you remember those days back then. The reason I'm going through this history is it provides you some context of the modern world heading into this hybrid infrastructure and some of the examples and knowledge we have that we can help you with that journey to the hybrid infrastructure. So we grew through the networking era and then the internet era, and everything got attached to the internet, and we had email. So SynerComm's been through that transformation. Then we had the Salesforce and era with the SaaS era, which was the big deal about applications now running from the internet. That was a big shift. Then also we hit the smartphone era and the public cloud era sometime after that. And things just get more and more functional as well as complex. Now we're heading into this era of platforms, hybrid infrastructures, Internet of Things, and artificial intelligence. A lot is changing. And one of the reasons we feel we're in a good position to help people change is that we've been through a lot of these paradigm shifts before and have helped our customers navigate them successfully by providing the right tools and solutions, but also the knowledge and the resources needed to both design, deploy, and operate infrastructures to leverage the modern world. So today, past COVID era, everybody's got pretty good work at home devices down there, like we see with the big monitors and the laptop in the middle. We're all playing with things like ChatGPT, but then we've got those conferences like this where all of a sudden you'll have problems. So when you talk about security, it's not just the security infrastructure that has to work. Also, the network has to be resilient and provide what the application needs so that the user experience is good. So the network and security infrastructure have to work together. And now when I talk about platforms, we're talking about things like Bitcoin, Ethereum, there's all kinds of those types of platforms. And then also all infrastructure tools in general. The model for deployment as we move to a modern infrastructure is sending signals to the cloud that basically get analyzed by engines that are smart about that specific domain, whether it's a wireless domain like we see with the extreme Wi-Fi, whether it's EDR like CrowdStrike, where it sends all that information to get global visibility to the cloud. And then in order to create that resiliency you need, you really have to look at what has to reside at each location or with the user and what has to happen in the cloud to give people that resilient experience they need so they can do their job from anywhere, accessing applications anywhere. And how do we automate all that so that as we can handle the complexity and let the company thrive? So when you start to look at migrating there, are we in a period of needing faster horses for this particular project? Or do we really need to have a paradigm shift? And that's, I think, where we work well with our clients. Also, as we make sure that we've been in business for 30 years, we have customers that have been with us for all that time, that we always try and stay aligned and relevant with what's needed in the industry to deliver on our areas of expertise piece, which include networks, security, cloud infrastructure, and information assurance to make sure that's all secure. But then also we challenge when necessary to make sure that we have the right perception and we're taking advantage of things like paradigm shifts to give the functionality and agility you need for your infrastructure. So what does the work from anywhere network with applications anywhere environment have to look like, and how has that stressed our security infrastructures? If you look at that diagram there, types of users you could have would be people in your campus or headquarters, people in branch offices. You could have factories or healthcare facilities, people working from anywhere to access those. But then you also have your customer networks, which include your suppliers, your partners, your customers, and they all need to be able to have access to basically your data center and hosting centers, whether they reside in a private infrastructure or a public cloud infrastructure, the SaaS apps you must share with them, the general purpose internet. And then you also must have a central source of authentication and keeping track of all these people. So how has infrastructure needs evolved to meet this work from anywhere, apps anywhere environment? You've seen the verify but trust model get changed to where people are implementing zero trust model because of the continuous exploitation of identities and users. And we talked about earlier with KnowBe4, getting the multi-factor correct and right to put another barrier there. Point in time type assessments are now being augmented with continuous assessment and status updates so that there's no man in the middle attacks, and we know the posture of our assets and where they're located at all times. And then our defensive security controls have tried to evolve by taking like user awareness training like we talked about with KnowBe4, and not just having that be store training and then going through scenarios and then answering questions, but actually real-time interacting with things like CrowdStrike to say, hey, this user is doing something that could be risky, and notifying that user real-time so that they're learning actually as they're playing the game. And then multi-factor we talked about isn't all created equally, and we've had to evolve that now to phishing resistant multi-factor. And we all know the desktop, which has been the victim of phishing attacks as well for years, has evolved from things like antivirus, which was signature-based, endpoint protection suites, which did things like trying to whitelist only certain applications that affected usability. And now we're to the EDR world, which is basically watching a series of behaviors to determine if that's risky or not. And that's why security enforcement is so difficult. And we'll show a few examples of that, is mitigating risk, but balancing that with usability. And we're also seeing a convergence of network infrastructure with wired and wireless and SD-WAN access with those security controls, with only putting the security controls at the edge that makes sense, and applying that zero plus infrastructure into the cloud so that you can apply those controls from no matter where a user is. And we've seen the attack recognition systems trying to evolve from the SIM world with automation to the SOAR world, and now trying to mix it together into the right recipe to give you the right visibility with the XDR world, which we will talk about in a minute here. And really the model we're seeing right now is that leverage outside vendors for doing the routine things like looking at 99% of the noise and making sure that you're not surprised by something that might be happening to your infrastructure because you're busy running your business. But then the internal resources are the ones that really understand the environment they're operating in, as well as the context of risk for your organization. So the hybrid SOC is the current best practice where you have the right people internally, but let them get as much expansion as they can and cover as much ground by augmenting them with third-party resources. And for example, of the worst case functionality that we have to be able to deliver for a zero trust environment, and say you possibly have an employee that maybe is out at an event and they don't have access to their own device. So maybe they got to log on to a relative's computer to access maybe a SaaS app, like let's say ServiceNow, to check a ticket. How can you enforce your security policies when someone's logging in? You have to have an intelligent network. That's why the core or the cloud has to be very smart, your security cloud, to enforce things like if I try to come to a ServiceNow with a valid username and password, a redirect through my security controls in the cloud to apply policies based on the device and where the person is. And that's that transparent security that we're all working towards. So as we talked about the zero trust model and all the components, it's not just the people, it's the device, whether it's managed, unmanaged, where is the data located, whether you have multi-factor, is that device, like in the hospital world, is that at someone's home? How do we keep track of all that and really have the context to make sure we're operating in a secure environment? And the key to really making the zero trust model work is really conditional access policy engines that based on the signals of where this person is, what type of device he's in, what time of day, do we allow him to have full access, limited access, or completely block access? And that's really the secret recipe that's always being tweaked when you're balancing, again, the employee access, customer access, and business partner access. And these are the types of projects that we've helped customers deploy. And again, you have to have the right tools. If you don't have the right tools that can see what needs to be seen, your security can only be as good as what your signals are. And the tuning of those signals to identify risky events that you're aware of, as well as training of your SOC teams to respond to those events. And what did the age infrastructure look like versus the modern security infrastructure? The perimeter in the old days was around the data center primarily, or your headquarters, and users that worked at home would VPN in and just really extend that perimeter through a VPN. But that's not sufficient today when you're obviously accessing all these applications that could be located in the cloud or in public clouds and private clouds. So the modern infrastructure has expanded the perimeter. So instead of just covering the headquarters, which still gets covered, it's also got to access it wherever that user may be and be able to get in the path of that connection to make those intelligent decisions on what types of access to allow so users can get their work done while not causing risk to the organization. So what do you need to do to really have these work at home, work from anywhere type of deals? You need to have ways of locating not only the user, but also the devices. Think of a healthcare system where you have a person that has a medical device at home and the person, and how do you make sure that you can enforce zero trust with both devices like PCs that have very sophisticated access controls like 802.1x versus agentless, and knowing where they're located, for instance, in a hospital. So you have to, there's really lots of elements to think about, as well as we talked about real-time applications and making sure that you have the resiliency that's required, whether that's through multiple paths to the internet, being able to troubleshoot and isolate net causes of problems on the network proactively. So some of the different types of partners that you're going to want to consider when you're looking at designing this modern infrastructure are your identity and access management system, which generally Active Directory is the source of truth, enhanced by tools like Okta to expand to different applications. You also have Internet of Things devices, and you have tools like Armis and Forescout that can help with the asset discovery and authentication and protection for those types of devices. And then you have to have a single source of truth for your addressing, but also your DNS when you have people working all over the place. So you can tell where an incident came from very quickly and not have to be searching through logs. SynerComm helps with our attack surface management solution. We can validate what your architecture looks like and all the assets available from the internet. And then we talked about Business Partner Extreme, who can help implement zero trust networks, as well as the segmentation necessary in the wired and wireless and SD-WAN in the data center. We have the traditional security infrastructure players, Palo Alto, the Zscalers, the CrowdStrikes, the email, Mimecast, those are all your big attack vectors. So we basically have years of building these things together while optimizing the cost of ownership to get these done. And then we mentioned our friends here today from KnowBe4 about all that life cycle of training and making that real time to make your network behave in a secure fashion. In SynerComm, to tie it all together, we have our thing called our One SSP, which has basically multiple elements, but it's basically aligns the elements of risk assessment, tying your security with your threats mitigation strategy, but also we work with some third parties to we can tie that with the insurance requirements for particular industries, what insurance companies are looking for, so we can really validate financially what their model looks like from your risk mitigation strategy. If you have different levels of risk mitigation, how might that affect your insurance? So that's a very popular service we have now that we've worked with a lot of the regulated, like the financial, the insurance industries, insurance type providers, and then manufacturers on providing that kind of visibility, not just on aligning your risks with your business initiatives, but also the financial models to go with that. Basically, we have one of our customers here, Gwen Miller, mentioned that she was able to significantly reduce her liability insurance by using our program. And I tell this story because it just, I think is a great example of the type of work we do. We've worked with healthcare exchanges for the healthcare exchanges in the country, and they've needed to have compliance like MARZ. And we basically have been called by states, we've been called in to help work with some of these exchanges that won the bids in their state so that we can help them on their path to understanding how they're compliant, how they can produce the artifacts and evidence that they are compliant. And we act as that trusted third party between the states that issue the healthcare exchange bids and actually execution of making sure they're compliant. And then also, as you're deploying some of these newer technologies, there's always the chance of risk of what happens if I try and deploy some new technologies, and when do I move off of a legacy, kind of like the old world used to say, I never got fired for buying IBM, and the risk associated with deploying those new assets. We've got lots of experience aligning your opportunities of our customers with our business partners, and also providing them and supporting them as the inevitable things that we didn't know when we started a project come up, and getting customers through that. Then on top of that, SynerComm can help you with your information assurance needs. In order to run a good information assurance program, you need to be aware of the global threats, like the known exploited vulnerabilities catalog that you can get from the government. Also, you have known industry issues like password enforcement on most systems is not good. They can enforce length or complexity, but not both together. So you can end up with passwords like password 1, 2, 3, and 4 exclamation point. So we can help customers all across with the understanding their security posture by assessing their network, their internal network, their custom applications, their APIs, and attack vectors through passwords like we talked about, and then doing purple teaming to validate so you can tune your SOC controls to make sure you can recognize these attacks. And then we also build up local threat intelligence by applying what we know from the global side, what we've learned from the red teaming exercises and purple teaming exercises. And we do specialty work like password hashing analysis to make sure how many times like the password 1, 2, 3, and 4 might be in your Active Directory. Maybe you've got 10,000 users and you've got 200 people using the same password, which makes you vulnerable to things like password spraying and account takeover. So we, in addition to doing the infrastructure, understanding the needs and understanding your health, your risks, we can then help deploy large projects through our global logistics services that we've done for many people in our asset management portals that allow you to not have to take on the burden of, say, deploying a wireless infrastructure refresh or a branch office refresh to 1,000 locations around the globe. We do that for many Fortune 500 customers for the past decade, as well as tracking your assets and making sure that you're not paying for licenses you don't use. You make sure you're aware of end-of-life assets and optimizing your contracts to make sure that you're only paying what you need to have the coverage that you are looking for from your controls. Again, SynerComm, red teaming, we can help you with the blue teaming, we can help you with the infrastructure and tying it all together. And as part of our presentation at the show today, we're basically offering out a 14-day trial of our attack surface management application, which brings up a lot of information that you may or may not be aware of, things that are existing websites, cloud assets, anything that's known and unknown, and that's but accessible through the internet. That's a tool that was developed for our pen testers, but also as the backbone of our continuous penetration testing offering that we do with many Fortune 500 type customers, and then also specialty applications that you can add on, like we said, the continuous pen testing, where we bring our human pen testers in to actually validate your security posture if we see anything new or changed as part of our attack surface management. And we also offering a special on if you're interested in your Active Directory, say you've got 10,000 users, an assessment of your passwords to see how that hygiene can be exploited to make your security posture stronger.